Very warm welcome to all of you for yet another episode of Right Circle, sponsored by Shri Siemens in association with Prabhakar Foundation, SAS Women and Spagia Foundation, and of course, Yahi. It's just so nice to see all of you month after month. It's just reaffirming for us to continue to promoting reading and thinking and ideating in Jaipur. We have a very, very spunky writer, illustrator, designer. Just came to know about him doing a freelance project with Sea Change, which immediately made me start thinking that some talents we didn't know of. I think all of us have those, but with that, I'd like to welcome Rohan Chakravarty amongst us. He's the creator of Green Humor, a series of cartoons on wildlife and conservation. Green Humor is the first series of comics from India to be distributed internationally by a major syndicate, Universal Press. Coconomics, am I saying that correctly? No. Cocomics, sorry. And appears periodically in wildlife magazines and papers. He's also collaborating, like I just mentioned, with wildlife and conservation organizations to produce illustrated awareness material, and has a huge list of awards which goes up to that much in a paragraph, so you can start imagining. I'm not going to read all of those out, but we are indeed very, very fortunate to have you amidst us, Rohan. I'm so glad you accepted our invite. And to top it all is a very, very special moderator, Arijit Banerjee, who is an officer of the Indian Forest Service working in Jaipur. He loves food, that I know. Books and nature, that too, because I follow you on Instagram, sir, and I love the pictures you put. Also is raising awareness about bird life and wildlife in his own way. More than anything else, characteristic, very witty sense of humor. So you're in for a treat today. Just leave all your serious thinking caps behind. Yield to what Rohan and Arijit are going to talk about. Before I hand over the stage to them, Abdul, please. I'm going to also ask you to please to please keep your phones on silent. And before we start, I'm going to give the mic over to Prerna, who is the PR executive for ITC Rajputana, to just give a small note of welcome to all of you.
Hello everyone, welcome you all to ITC Rajputana. Glad to have you all over here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mita. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Right Circle. Rohan, Jaipur, Rajasthan in the rains is absolutely fascinating. It's everything It looks like what Rajasthan is not even supposed to look like. It's green. Incidentally, this is Rohan's first visit to Jaipur, and we have to make sure he keeps coming back. So that I would request all of you to chip in whichever way you can. I have the privilege this evening to present Rohan Chakravarty. Anybody who crawls the conservation space today in India would surely have come across his illustrations. In this country, we have had a long and rich tradition of illustrations to make a point. You call them cartoons, you call them strips, and some very famous names, R.K. Lakshman, Kutti, Shankar, Mario Miranda, and thought-provoking, taking sides on issues, taking sides on politics. Here, somebody has taken the side of conservation. Unusual to say the least. Rohan, this evening is about you telling us a lot of stuff. So, how did it start? Where? In school? Doodling? Class? Where?
I have to first thank Meeta for inviting me here and having me here, and for making such elaborate arrangements to ensure that I am having a good time in Jaipur. Thanks all of you for turning up in such gloomy weather and leaving aside such a beautiful city, such a beautiful evening. Barbie and Oppenheimer to join me, listen to me speak here. Thanks for that. And thanks to you, sir, for agreeing to moderate this session. I begin with a little bit of my story. I probably have been doodling ever since I was in my mother's womb. I keep saying that my brother, who came 4 years later, actually saw some of the doodles still in my mother's womb while he was there. So he can attest to that.
That's a new one.
And as it happens with every teenager who's from a small town and who doesn't have any idea of what to do next, I had no idea as well that art could be a career. I got into dentistry, just happened to join the rat race. My friend said that, you make money as a dentist. So, and all the girls were opting for dentistry as well. So that's what I followed suit, and midway I realized that this is not for me. Nagpur has very beautiful winters, and waking up on a winter morning to see birds is acceptable. To peep into rotten mouths is simply not. So it's a noble profession. I have no disrespect for it. I mean no disrespect for it. It's just not for me. And by the time I realized it was too late, my next interest was animation. I gave up dentistry right after I got my degree. I never looked back at it or practiced. I worked in animation at a film studio for 4 years. And that more or less laid the foundations for what I do today, because the principles of animation are more or less similar for cartooning as well. I actually got the inception of my series, Green Humor, which is a series of cartoons, comics, and illustrations on wildlife and conservation. The inception of the series happened when I first saw tigress in the wild, and that magical feline gaze happened to change something within me. And I wasn't really finding my feet as a cartoonist. I was dabbling a lot. I was trying to draw celebrities, politics, social issues, and really getting nowhere. When I met the tigress, I thought, why not take more interest in wildlife, take more serious interest in wildlife, and see what comes out of merging two of my interests, which is wildlife and cartooning. And eventually, it took 5 years to develop the series into what it is today, and a very long journey midway. But yeah, I have to thank that tigress wherever she is for me being here today.
What a fascinating story. Please. Rohan, let's get the serious stuff off the table first. For a country such as India, which is booming into development, into services, and there is a political undertone to every development aspect, whether we like it or not. Conservation is at crossroads. We get groups of people, interest groups, NGOs, those who care, flagging that there are issues regarding the new biological diversity bill. I believe it's been passed today. There are issues regarding the new Forest Conservation Act. There are issues related to development. So when you draw on a deep sea port in Andamans or infrastructure on the border, international boundary of India, and there is a price to be paid. There is a price in terms of loss of wild elements, if not exactly biodiversity. So as a citizen, as a thinker, do you feel that there can be balances which should be arrived at, can be arrived at?
Absolutely. I think the right kind of balance is the need of the hour. But the balance is compromised, which is why I draw what I draw. And the intention of presenting an opinion in my cartoons is never to take a political side myself, never to enforce my political opinion on my reader, but to encourage the forming of an informed opinion, both on my part and as well as my reader's part. So that is where I'm trying to get at with every cartoon that has a political undertone to it. And the political undertone is only because there is a confluence of or a convergence of environment and politics in a country like ours. They can not be viewed in isolation, these two entities. And what I'm trying to do with my cartoons that do speak about these matters, for example, the Great Nicobar megaport, or development of dams in the northeast, especially in the Dibang Valley region. I've drawn a fair bit of cartoons on those issues. Great Indian busters being killed in Rajasthan because of wind energy and power lines, etc. So I think a lot of the conservation decisions that are made are not in the right conjunction with science, which is where I feel that communicators like me have a role to play in trying to bring scientists and the government closer together by bridging that gap of communication that exists in a country like us on a major level. Because I always when I'm delivering talks to audiences, I always use this example. I give them 3 images and I ask them to identify them. So the first set of images usually has a popular actor or an actress like Priyanka Chopra. The second set of images has politicians. They may be Joe Biden if I'm speaking abroad, or Modi and Rahul Gandhi if I'm speaking here. And the third image is of a dragonfly. This dragonfly is the globe skimmer. It's the longest migrating insect. And I think if you go out on your terrace in a month or so from now, you will see swarms of them visiting our country. And it's a very special creature because it not only is the longest migrating insect on Earth, it broke the record previously held by the monarch butterflies of the US. It also comes here to eat mosquitoes, and it is directly responsible for our good health. And just to pull the audience's leg, because they can't tell me what the dragonfly species is, I tell them that Priyanka Chopra is giving you a migraine with a faux American accent, and yet you know who she is. So this is a problem I have with the way information is disseminated and consumed in our country, because you and I should be caring a lot more about that dragonfly visiting us rather than Modi or Priyanka Chopra. And I think this is also because this kind of an information gap also has its impacts on the way policy and conservation work in this country.
Very, very well said. Information is a certain very well-known business person in this country a couple of years back had made a comment that information is currency, which it actually is. Either you are correctly informed or you are reacting or basing your decision sets on wrong information, misinformation, or even disinformation. These are different terms with different contextual definitions, but information is not only power, it helps you to form an opinion. There could be two views about development, about infrastructure, about policy, but there cannot be an argument that every living being deserves an equal chance. A chance which we human beings are going to give ourselves is what the chance we give it to a tiger. A tiger is big and glamorous, so is an elephant, a rhinoceros. But then there are lots of small birds and animals and creatures about whom we don't know. We don't even stop to observe them, most of us. Jaipur district has nearly probably more than 400 species of birds. That's one third of the birds found in the Indian subcontinent. So that's just Jaipur. There are other places which have even more in Rajasthan. So there has been a shortcoming on part of people in the government like me. We have not done enough to communicate. In the government, I always accept that our communication sucks big time. We just don't know how to talk. We talk in a very sarkari language, which is boring, which is just put somebody to sleep. I know the sort of conservation communication documents which pass through my table, through my hands, have my signature. It's bad. The forest department, social media, take a look at it, you'll run away from it. It's that bad. And that is where expert communication, today's world is not of a generalist, it is for specialists. And Rohan here is a specialist in the very sense of the term when it comes to communication. Those of you who are aware of his green humor, please check out the Instagram pages. Every day there's something new. And I've seen a lot of conservation organizations borrow heavily. WCS does, WTI does, WWF does. I get to talk to Dr. Dipankar Sengupta in Delhi, and he's a big fan, as big a fan of yours as I am, and correctly so. So when you go through Rohan's work, I can tell you expand more of it. There are issues about policy, which is good, which is bad, windmills, bastards, yes. And then there is information. Information about species, very basic information about bats. We either fear bats or hate bats. But bats can be fascinating and they perform an incredible range of ecological services. So I'll let Rohan expound on it. Incidentally, a family member is a researcher on bats. His family member.
That's right. My brother works on bats. He's a bat biologist. He's just in the process of completing his PhD on the bats of Himalayas. So he's actually discovered quite a few species that discovered new ranges for species within India. Discovered a lot of new calls for these species. He's working on developing a call library, like we have a call library for birds. He's working on developing a call library for bats. And these are calls beyond the capacity of human hearing. So there's a lot of hard science and very complex science involved. Because I have two, not one but two scientists in my family. My wife also happens to be an urban ecologist, and she's also a very talented writer. She writes about trees. And because I have two scientists in my family, I can be sure that most of the science presented in green humor is sound, because I am constantly verifying it from these two scientists in my family, who are very harsh critics as well, by the way. All that aside, I think I don't claim to be a specialist. I'm an enthusiast. I love a lot of things and I try to merge them in the work I do. My love for wildlife reflects in my work. My love for cinema reflects in my work. And because I have varied interests, I try to use it to my advantage to make my work a little bit better. If you read this book, you'll come across a ton of pop culture references that I use in order to make lay people like you and me feel for the animals that I'm talking about. So, for example, just to give you one small example from this book, there is a really interesting creature called the sea pangolin, and it is a resident of hydrothermal vents, which means that it can tolerate really high, unimaginable levels of temperature because it lives in hydrothermal vents. And not many people know about this creature because the deep sea is inaccessible to most of us, and it has only recently been discovered. And we could lose this creature in its entirety because of hydrothermal mining, which is coming up in a big way because of the metals that are purportedly needed for green energy. Now, this is just one example. There are several others that have not even been discovered, and we might lose them before science gets a chance to discover these or name these creatures and make them known to the world. And I think that's an absolutely miserable thing. And I really hope, I recently published a cartoon with DW News, that's a German news channel. I have a weekly column with them, a bi-weekly column with them. And we did a cartoon on Norway's decision to lease out its marine territories for deep sea mining. They happen to be the first nations to actually get into the business. And this is really worrying news because India has a massive coastline. India has the capacity to sort of lead the way in deep sea conservation. We're poised very well where it stands now as an emerging global power. And I really hope that cartoons like these reach the right offices and the right ears and the right eyes. So that's well, the pop culture reference I was talking about is this deep sea pangolin. I quoted saying one of Tony Stark's famous punchlines. I'm not a Marvel or a DC fan, but I actually took the effort to consult friends who are to learn what Iron Man or Tony Stark speaks like, and adopt those kind of cultural references to these characters, just to make them more relatable, just to make them more popular among people who like Marvel and DC, which happen to be most of India's youth today. So that's just one such example. There are several other pop culture references you'll find in this book. A lot of contemporary issues on environment that just get hidden in the newspaper. That nobody pays attention, and I try to bring them into the forefront. I try to make them part of popular discourse and daily conversation. And in the 13 years that my series has existed on the web and in the print, I have a weekly column with the Hindu that comes out every Sunday. Uh, I have managed to amass a readership which is very diverse in its background. Earlier, of course, it started with a circle of people that were directly involved with wildlife science and conservation, but over the years, it has grown to a readership that is from various backgrounds that engages in mostly healthy discourse on social media as well as on email and various other platforms around my work. And in that process, I have also had a few tangible examples of actual change that art like this has been able to bring. Just to give you an example of that, when the draft EIA came out in 2020, that was a time when our first COVID lockdown was going on. This was a draft policy that would have enabled industries and corporations to have their way by practically scrapping the process of environmental impact assessment for projects concerning development. Now, this policy came with a lot of jargon that lay people would never have engaged with if there was no creative angle deployed to communicate these issues. And that's something I realized early on when the draft came. So I consulted two lawyers who were relentlessly following this issue up. They were tweeting about it. They were tweeting about the policy day in and day out. Nobody was reading their tweets. Nobody was reading any of the news that the policy came with. So I got down with them. I tried to understand what the salient features of the policy are, and I converted that into a comic strip of the then Environment Minister, Mr. Javadekar, is depicted as a superhero called Clearance Man, and he's doing all kinds of things to make it easier for India to be developed. And that is something that caught the attention of people. And this comic strip became one of the online faces of this movement, the online movement against the policy. Eventually, in a few months, it amassed, I think, 6 lakh signatures and did push the government on the back foot with that particular policy. So that is when I realized that art like this can go beyond just being a pretty picture.
Art is certainly not just a pretty picture. I tell you, in Rajasthan, a mainstay, a major economic driver is tourism. We have the forts and palaces, monuments, cultures, flavors, sounds, textures, tapestries of all types, and of course the landscapes. If you do a quick poll across the country, Ranthambore would come up as one of the most popular, I won't say the best, but certainly the most popular of tiger destinations, or people would want to go to the desert. There's a very affluent, upwardly mobile, young set of professionals who like to travel, stay out, experience, photograph, videograph. And the tribe is increasing and good for it. Now, given the fact that I have some interest, professional or otherwise, in the conservation space, I do travel, not too much, a bit. And what I personally feel is lacking is in the quality of interpretation which the management or other stakeholders offer. So if I'm visiting a tiger park anywhere in India, the moment I or any tourist, any of you out here see a tiger, the need for interpretation probably stops. It's magnificent, it's extremely glamorous, good looking, there is a mystery and order to it. But what happens till that point of time where I don't see a tiger, and there could be instances where I won't see a tiger. I've paid a significant amount of money to travel to stay and visit the area. How does that experience be better? What is that we need to improve?
Again, I think it all boils down to communication. The way we see wild spaces, the way we engage with wild spaces, and I think it is up to communicators like me, not just cartoonists, but photographers, people who make films, people who write, to kind of enable our audiences to appreciate nature better, and that's something I'm in constant pursuit of. Just to give you an example again of the exact issue that you have rigged up, I did a month-long series of cartoons called Saving Our Stripes. It appeared in the Times of India in just after we completed the 50th year of Project Tiger. It was in celebration of that event. So one of the cartoons in that 30 cartoon long series was about a tiger and four butterflies perched on its tail. The plain tiger butterfly, the striped tiger butterfly, the blue tiger butterfly, and the glassy tiger. They are all named tigers because they have stripes on them. And the tiger says, those who look at insects will never miss a tiger when they go out on a safari. So it is ideas like these, and in fact, my last book called Naturalist Ready has no big cat in it. It's a book on wildlife, Indian wildlife, without any mention of a big cat in it. There is a leopard that plays a small part in one of the stories, but the whole point of the series is for people to observe their own environments, their own vicinities, and figure out what all is around them. Because that's what the protagonist, who's a mongoose, is doing within his home, which is Kanha. He's a mongoose from Kanha Tiger Reserve. He thinks he's a detective, and whatever he observes in nature, he treats them as crime scenes. And in the process of unraveling these little mysteries, my readers get acquainted with the workings of the natural world. So because it is from the eyes of a mongoose, it's a much smaller universe than what we are used to, when we talk about tigers and leopards, and when what we conjure the moment we think of a national park. This mongoose and his viewpoint is much smaller than ours. So you are in a way introduced to a micro world through this entire book. And if you liked this particular book, I would urge you to pick up a copy of Ready as well.
Amazing, amazing. So now let's get into some fun part. I have a rather boring hobby, so I look at birds. Now, since I've been looking at birds for a few years, 25, 30 years now, and in the process when you look at birds, you end up looking at flowers, at butterflies, at leopards, and it's fairly easy in Jaipur, by the way. If you're here tomorrow, you should make a trip and check out the spots. Wildlifers, people interested in conservation, comes in all shapes and sizes. So there's one group of serious bird watchers, usually loners, who really frown upon people carrying cameras and making a noise. They're loners.
I'm among them.
Yes, so they would, if at all, get into a conservation would be about whether the Zeiss binoculars are better than the Swarovski binoculars, or something like that. Then there is a group of people who love their cameras, who the young and old boys' toys, girls' toys, give it that too. Big lenses, DSLRs and mirrorless, expensive stuff. Many of them shoot very bad, some of them shoot very well. And there's always social media where the first cousin will say, Bhaiya, what a shot. So there's always that validation is always available out there. And then there are plain fun-loving people, subgroups of all of them, somebody who's recording calls. I got severely shouted at by a friend of mine who records bird calls. And I was talking with another friend of mine, and he was absolutely frustrated, exasperated. He's my age, at more than 50 years old, and he just screamed at us, and shut up. That's it. So when you go out, how much would such various categories and subcategories of people interested in conservation impact the way you present your drawings or illustrations?
Well, to be honest, it was actually going out in nature with groups of people that got me into doing what I do. I used to volunteer for a group called Kids for Tigers, and I'm sorry, is there? So I used to volunteer for a group called Kids for Tigers, which is a Sanctuary Asia initiative. And this is something I picked up early on while I was still a dentistry student. And I thought by doing this, I would pick up a more serious interest and more knowledge on nature. And in that process, I started to train myself, going on these walks and picking up more knowledge with each walk. And that kind of influenced the direction of my art as well. So I won't judge the kind of interactions that people have with nature, be it a camera, be it a pair of binoculars. Again, I think it all boils down to striking the right balance between what you do. So a lot of photographers in trying to get the perfect shot often encroach safe boundaries of engaging with wildlife, uh, endangering their being in the process and endangering their ecologies in the process. Uh, those of you here who are into this kind of stuff might already know that there is a sort of a crisis boiling in India where that line of safety is being blurred more and more, where people are going out with equipment into the wild and do not have much of an understanding of what level of engagement there should be, because a lot of people destroy nests in the process of getting the right picture, or and of course, like sir mentioned, it is often driven by the need to be visible on social media. So again, I think it is up to communicators like me to fight that urge on part of a photographer, or just to sensitize these people the right way. So again, I think if you really understand the biology of a particular animal, you are bound to care about it more. What again? There's an important communication gap that exists here as well, in this country particularly. If you look at a bird guide, you will only find enough information to be able to tell you how to identify a particular species. Beyond that, there is nothing. There's no engagement that happens between the reader and the bird. And again, I felt the need to bridge this gap as an illustrator and as a bird watcher. I've been watching birds. Birds have been the easiest gateway for me to get initiated with nature. And most of my awareness around nature is directly related to bird biology. So, as an illustrator, what I could do was condense all this information into a book again, which is called Bird Business. It was my second book, and it is a series of 100 illustrated sequences of 100 Indian species of birds that describes how a particular bird interacts with the habitat around it, the environment around it, the resources around it, and what it goes about doing every day with its life. And I think that was one small step ahead of what bird guides give you, the ability to identify a bird. And this and yeah, bird. I'm sorry, I'm a little distracted by the noise. Please don't mind me fumbling. But yeah, this book was one small step in that direction.
That's Rajasthan's default background music.
Given it is my first trip to Jaipur, I might need some time getting used to it.
So yeah, so just to take this, just to illustrate this point a bit. Sunday afternoon, a neighbor of mine, colleague, had called me over for lunch. So he had a small kitchen garden in the quarter campus, and his wife was telling me that she had observed a bird. She didn't know the name, which had stitched together some couple of leaves of one bagan plant, and there were 4 eggs in it, and then 4 chicks in it. Till that Sunday morning, we were there in the afternoon, and then there's nothing there. The nest has vanished. So what happens is that it is fascinating, and people don't usually go out to harm birds and animals. But that proximity, that if I'm going near that nest every day, would be observed by a monkey, a crow, a feral cat, who will come and predate destroy that nest. So when the eggs or the chicks are destroyed, when they're killed, one generation, one season of reproduction is gone. It's gone out of the system. So it takes a lot of energy on part of those parents to court, mate, lay eggs, and bring up their young. So why do people do it? Why do even educated people do it? Because they don't know. Nobody has told them otherwise. Some people like me have been lucky because when I was in school doing this in a very small town in West Bengal, peeping at birds' nests and stuff, my mother used to give me a very tight slap on my head. There was no counseling and there was no negotiation when I was growing up. It was her way or the highway. And she's no more, but yeah, she did the right thing. These are different times. You can't raise a hand on children and stuff like that. All the best to you all. Kids. So, jokes apart, maintaining a safe distance from, you'll maintain a safe distance from a tiger. You won't be foolish to take a selfie with a tiger. But maintaining a safe distance from all other life forms makes sense. Even if it's a flower. And when you take a photograph with your cell phone of a flower and you step so close that the light is blocked, you won't get a nice photograph of a flower. So, maintaining a distance, and this is true for all spheres of life. You give your children space, couples are supposed to give space to each other. So, giving space is very important. Rohan, activism, conservation activism is an end thing. Conservation cannot be divorced from development or politics. Environmentalism is politics globally. So India's commitments to a carbon neutral economy, India's commitments in reducing greenhouse emissions, there are always points and carbon counterpoints brought against us by China or USA or European Union. So where do you stand? I mean, is what we're doing enough for greening? We need to do more OECMs, Kishan Bags, Aravalli biodiversity parks. What's the way forward in your view?
Again, I'm no expert. I don't think I'm in the right
The
position
lay
to answer
person
this
is
question.
the citizen is the best expert.
Right. But I'll speak to you as an artist and as somebody who has drawn for the last two COPs, COP26 and COP27, and I'll hopefully be drawing for COP28 as well. I've spent a lot of time listening to what happens at these big climate events where decisions that concern our planet and would probably govern the course of the planet for the next 30 years are made. And there are a lot of cartoons in this book that you'll find that were done at these two events. So I think these are very complex issues for both people involved in the conferences and people who are affected by these conferences to understand. So there is a lot of global politics on climate change, and I'm sure most of you are aware of what is going on. I think a primary driver of climate change has been colonialism, which the world is getting more and more aware of. Thanks also largely to a lot of communication in the press that is happening around it. So naturally, a lot of my cartoons tend to address this issue when I am representing India as a cartoonist at these events. And naturally, I address these issues on multiple stands and levels. So when I'm speaking about, say, the commitments of developing nations towards mitigating climate change or adapting to climate change as a coalition, as opposed to what, say, developed nations are doing. Maybe not living up to their promises. Maybe you all know that there is a massive dearth of funds that the developed world owes to the developing world in order to make them more climate resilient. And this has reflected in the Pakistan floods of last year in Sindh. And a lot of these issues are discussed at COPs repeatedly without really reaching a fruitful conclusion. So a lot of my cartoons tend to speak about what is really holding people down. And there's a cartoon on European nations getting together because of the fuel crisis that the Ukraine war has created. And these nations are discussing what should we do next, how should we ensure fuel and energy security, what more can be done. And I think the Chancellor of Germany, he suggests that we burn decades of climate powers to produce more energy. So there are a lot of these cartoons that you'll find. I think these are issues that need to be, again, addressed at multiple levels by citizens as well, because we know that even though India has been committing to a set of goals, a set of targets, it has also been falling short, and there are reasons for that. The reasons being that yes, India needs development, India needs infrastructure to counter threats like China, secure our coasts in the Indian Ocean. But I, as an ordinary citizen and an artist, and somebody who engages with conservation organizations on a daily basis and scientists on a daily basis, I feel that the right kind of balance between policy and science has not been struck in this country. And again, it's because of various reasons. One of the largest reasons for this is a lack of communication between these two parties. And if multiple creators like me can commit to bridging that gap, I think we are seeing some kind of change in the next 5 years.
Fantastic. This is amazing. I mean, as I always maintain that there was a time when research, science, policy, everything was in the government domain. Maybe it's still true to a significant extent, in India at least. But one has to understand that one is education, a degree, the other part is knowledge. Knowledge is out there, and anybody who's a seeker can go looking. It won't evade a sincere effort by somebody who's seeking knowledge. The fun of the goddess Saraswati is the more you seek knowledge, the more you grow. The more you share knowledge, the more you learn. This thought, the fundamental thought, has been lacking in general, but times have changed. In a digitally connected world where every citizen, certainly in our country, is out to burn 2 GBs of data every day on his phone, the opportunities presented by those 2 GBs of data is fantastic. These are the times of collaboration. These are the times of partnerships. As a serving government officer, as a cadre officer of the Indian Forest Service, yes, I know a lot, but I certainly do not know it all. How do I communicate, Rohan, within the government setup on the importance of collaborations with scientists, with civil society, with communicators, which is very, very vital, various types. I can't tweet properly. Anchal can. I mean, that's her job. She does it better. She's younger. Faster fingers, whatever. Her brain is wired that way. Mine isn't. I'll try forming a sentence. I'll get bogged down whether my sentence is grammatically correct, and by that time, I've missed the chance. It's time sensitive. How do we improve this feeling? I mean, for collaborations within the government, with civil society, scientists, anybody who knows them.
I think it's very important for the government to have representatives like you who can inculcate a sense of humor within offices of power, because I think that is what is really lacking. And I think humor really takes care of a lot of situations. Humor really bridges a lot of gaps in communication. I always keep saying this, humor is like a slap on one cheek and a simultaneous kiss on the other. So a lot of the satire that I'm trying out, a lot of the sarcasm I'm trying out is often softened. The blow is softened because of humor.
What hot and cold love.
Right. So I think the more humor we have in discourse with interacting with government on a day-to-day basis on social media, rather than vitriol, that would really bring a lot of people close together. At least people who have a common goal and a common motive. And once humor has bridged the gaps between these parties, I think it will be a smoother way forward. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does make sense because I tell you, my offices are in a fairly new building, 7-year-old building in Jaipur. It's all air conditioned and green building and all that, but it's as interesting as a morgue. But that's our building anyway. And it's the forest department where it shouldn't have been that boring. You see, it could have been much more colorful, lit up, plants, greenery, photographs, whatever. But
You had a
it's
snake
just not
today.
there. And yeah, somebody told me, "Ek sarp nikla tha." That's us. Now, children, in all this gloomy, dystopian existence, one very redeeming aspect is children. Young children, classes 1 to 5, 7, those who haven't yet gone into that IIT, JEE, NEET, PG rat race, prior to that, I find them very refreshing. They're still ready to ask questions. They still don't have that fear of spiders or snakes or rats or lizards. They're still ready to go near and take a look. But it's very difficult to curate communication for children. I feel it's very difficult. Much more difficult than talking to an adult. So, I want to share your thoughts on what is the best way of approaching children, since you do work with kids.
Again, when I spoke to you about the nature walks that I used to do, they were with school kids, and I have been interacting with children for a very long time, even though I don't have any of my own, and I don't plan to either. I think yes, they do bring a ray of hope in this entire very convoluted and complicated discourse, because I think things are turning around for good in that age group in this country, based on what I have been witnessing as part of my workshops. I do a lot of workshops where I teach kids how to draw wildlife cartoons from scratch, how to create their own characters from their own favorite animals, and speak about the issues that those animals are facing in their cartoons. And I do these sessions with schools, with various kinds of education institutions that bring kids of various backgrounds together. So I have been observing that the level of engagement has certainly been changing. Earlier, if you asked a kid to name a national park, they would say Yellowstone. Now things have changed. They do know Kanha, they do know Bandhavgarh, they do know things as remote as Eagle Nest, which are great things, which is a great change. So yeah, I think what kids are also doing is forcing their parents to take an interest, because it's the parents that regulate what the child reads, what the child does as a hobby, and eventually what he or she will pick up as a career. So the parents of that particular age group are also taking it upon themselves to be more aware, and these are good signs. These are excellent signs. I think that I think more again, what is hampering the kind of communication that goes out to these people is this trend of social media influencers, where a lot of the information may or may not be verified, may not be backed by actual facts, and it is more about visibility and popularity than it is about disseminating information. So my request would be for people who have taken this upon themselves to popularize photography or engagement with nature of a certain kind through social media, to be more ethical and to be more scientific in their approach.
Fantastic, because I've been to Bharatpur and I've seen people, there are people who mentor a group of nature enthusiasts for a photographic trip. And this is particularly true in case of nesting birds, where twigs will be cut or removed, and in the process the bird and the nest gets disturbed, as I've already mentioned. And then their second group, which is severely targeted, are snakes. You can make out from a photograph of a snake that the snake is distressed. It's coiled up to strike. It's placed very neatly in a very curated background on a log with no distractions. It's all done. The point is it worth it? Such photographs, such behavior has no conservation connect. Yeah, I can post 1 million photographs on social media, but it is not valid as a data. Data cannot be anecdotal. Data has to have a system, a scheme, and a mathematics to it. So people do it in our spaces: friends, family, young people, elderly people, people of my age. I'm no spring chicken to do it. So pointing it out, I need not get into a fight or fisticuffs, but pointing it out that some things are not worth their effort. So in various groups and stuff, you see that there's a ban on posting photographs of the bustard or oriental dwarf kingfisher, or NTCA will say don't let out location of tiger and cubs. So because it's once bitten, twice shy, people have had the tendency to rush and disturb and not behave ethically. So ethics in conservation is a very important thing. Ethics is important in every sphere of life, if I may say so. So, similarly, in conservation too, ethics is very important. Now, right, Rohan, in Rajasthan, a large state, a very traditional social setup and a very varied social setup. Old traditions of folklore, legends, parables, music, storytelling. Storytelling traditions which are so old we are probably not even in a position to date them, but they still exist. Much less practitioners, lack of patronage, of course. How can we weave in the music from the dune, the parables from the Orans, the Phad, the Astane Goi as a tool for promoting that message of conservation, climate, behavior, whatever?
Well, the good news is that all of this is already happening in various other parts of the country, and it just needs an exchange of information to adapt to a region. So, for example, I have worked with the Bugun community in Arunachal, where it's a community conserved area, eagle-less wildlife sanctuary, and it is known for a particular bird called the Bugun leochikla, which is named after this community. It was discovered as late as 2006, and the Bugun community uses oral history from decades of gathered knowledge from their elders and their music, their folklore to propagate stories of coexistence with the environment among future generations. And this has resulted in various kinds of environmental festivals that celebrate wildlife every year in these villages. And yeah, I think what the science community and the conservation communication community can start doing is to connect people from various parts of the country who are working or undertaking similar endeavors to exchange a bit of cultural knowledge and information and figure out coalitions and festivals that can happen in conjunction between different parts of the country.
Completely Meeta's area of expertise. I will urge her to look into this. I mean, how can the music from the dunes or the Manganiyas and the Dastane Koi have a handshake with the message of conservation and Rajasthan? And there is no better platform, no better landscape for such a thing than Rajasthan. Please look at this.
Sure, we'll get Rohan to collaborate with us.
Thank you so very much, ladies and
We
gentlemen.
will, yeah, thank you so much. We'll open it up for questions.
For questions.
But before I'm going to be selfish. Rohan, you write first and draw later, or draw first or write later? Especially with the Pug Marks book.
Well, I'm a weird artist, cartoonist. I know all other cartoonists who I know, they begin drafting text first. But I am completely driven by visuals. Unless and until I have a visual in mind, I can never come up with a punchline. So it's always the image first for me.
No, I just wanted to know because I went through the book and I was wondering. That was the first question that came to my mind. But it's a really fun book, guys. So it's over to you guys for questions.
Rohan and Arijit, we're delighted to be here today. Unexpected, big set of flowers that you've given us today. Big. What is interesting is that while we talk of climate change, conservation, the means of exposing the population to them have been very orthodox till now. For example, I have seen a big bird paradise in one of the smaller nations just the other day. Huge variety of birds, well maintained, well kept, but still imprisoned. So my first question is, as a green cartoonist, have you any opinion about birds in captivity? Large numbers, open, small cages, big cages, anything, wherever you want to talk about. The other is a very divergent question that I want to ask because I take permission for two questions. The recent floods that have devastated not only Pakistan but huge parts of India, and we have not had a summer in Rajasthan this year. Have you in any way used this huge change in our weather, climate, in your cartoons recently to bring about, because I heard in passing two statements by you. One was that the alternative uses of fuel, wind and solar, you're not very happy about it either. Because I'm told that if you put the solar panels on the terrain, the insects die underneath it. The birds don't nest underneath it. If you put it across a canal, the fishes die underneath it. So, where does the balance come in? We do need these alternative sources of fuel, and yet, where are we?
I'll speak about the first question first because it's easier. I am against the concept of captive wildlife unless it serves a larger purpose of conservation. There are a few zoos that do it in India, a few aviaries that do it in India as well. The ones I'm aware of are in Gangtok and Darjeeling. There may be more, but yeah, unless a zoo or an aviary is actually contributing to conservation, I don't think it makes any sense in this day and age to have them. Secondly, it's a very important and a very pertinent question today that you raised. I think that there are ways to go about making green energy actually green or sustainable. For example, if we speak about solar, there's a cartoon that discusses this issue in detail. It's about the conflict there is about how much of decentralization of solar can actually happen in order to make it sustainable. So if you, for example, if you're enabling a large section of a city to be solar equipped in the form of harnessing through panels on terraces, that would make a lot more sense than clearing out a grassland to install a solar plant. So it is things like these and engagements like these between citizens and governing authorities that need to happen more to implement green energy on a smaller but much more coalesced level to make it more sustainable rather than to say acquire new land and create another industry out of it. I think sir will be able to shed more light.
It made sense at one time to have solar panels on deserts.
Right.
No growth there, sunlight, excellent. But now we are told that
Yes.
if you put solar panels in the desert also,
There is a problem.
you destroy the economy.
Yes. So I think you should add your opinion to that.
That same desert at some point of time when 32 years back, when I was a probationer of the Indian Forest Service in Dehradun, there was hardly any talk of the desert. There's a lot of things which you learn by observation. That's exactly how you learn. You don't really learn from books. And then you realize how strikingly important the desert is. So I try to do some foolish stuff. So I was talking to a dear friend of mine who heads the Forest Survey of India these days. And we got talking that can we try to see how much annual grasslands in western Rajasthan do we have? Because the government of India ends up calling them scrub and desert. I don't like that term desert in some ways. So when we went about it, it's still not finished. It's just been one round of a few sample plots. And those in this room, you're from Rajasthan, you would know more that there is a typical grass form called sevan out in the desert, which is very nutritive for cattle and it protects the land, it prevents the sand dunes from shifting. It's a very useful grass. And very early days, but it's more than 20,000 metric tons of carbon being sequestered by it. Not many woodlands in the country don't do that. So is that important? Yes, I have the option of having large solar parks and fueling a social discontent by certain communities who have a deeper community tie than say you and me, the communities who are concerned about chinkara being chased down by wild dogs or not getting water to drink enclosed in a large fenced, barbed wire fenced area. So we started our discussion with balances and we'll probably end today's evening with balances. The balances are important. And so all this, as Rohan said, that rooftop terrace balcony solar model might be a more productive model. But no model will health unless each of us try to cut down on our own footprints. My own energy footprint is very high, and all that energy I need a particular type of footwear, my food, packaging. I do leave the tap open while I'm shaving every morning. All of it matters. Unless each of us cut down on our footprint, the government you and I elect and pay taxes. They're going to try to give you electricity.
Thank you.
So somewhere it's the individual who has to cut it down.
Thank you.
Rohan said that human beings are the wisest children of Mother Earth. But I feel they are the worst of all animals. I mean, we are wasting water, we are cutting trees, we are taking share of, we are encroaching other species spaces, taking their share of water, food, keep them in cages, as Sir said. We kill them, but we eat them. We have started eating bats also. So, and since you were referring to ecology development dialogue and you didn't bring market into it, which teaches me to encroach and just drag the earth, Mother Earth. So, and I'm really afraid because the environmental awareness in India is not very bright as a global perspective. So this question becomes very big. What is people's role and how do you see their role?
Like you said, it's a very sentence, so I'll have to detract a bit. So you said, humans are the worst children of the earth. I disagree.
I said wisest children of Mother Nature on the one hand and the worst of all animals.
But look at you, you were here discussing environmental issues with us at this time, so it's not all that bad. You brought up the issue of hunting bats and wildlife. I must tell you that a lot of my understanding of conservation had been very colonial, very textbookish, until I met hunting families in Arunachal and I stayed with them. They indulged in hunting bushmeat for subsistence, and yet, from all that I observed, they were doing more for wildlife conservation than the government has done. So, there are a lot of nuances like these in various parts of the country that we need to bring out. The thing with communicating about conservation is that there's no black and white. There's a lot of grey, and all these greys need to be brought out and understood and discussed and propagated through generations for our understanding of nature to be better and for our governance of environmental conservation to be better. And I believe that that's not what we are doing enough. We focus on blacks and whites. We've become very reductionary in the kind of information that we disseminate and consume. And I think that needs to change, even though we have tools like social media to tackle this this crisis of information that has befallen us in recent times. We are not doing enough with that. And I think if we become more a generation of readers than scrollers, I think that would really help things going forward. I'm sorry, have I answered your question adequately?
Readers and scholars, like I just make one comment here. It's like I tell my children that you girls have the attention span of mice. Are scrolling. Halt, look, read, for heaven's sake. Madam, please.
Thank you so much for the wonderful session to the two of you. And I'm so glad that you both spoke about children. My question to you is that I very closely work with children and young adults. So any kind of therapy or any kind of healing is directly proportional to nature. I'm sure you would know that. Any kind of healing, I mean any, and even therapies. But the young parents and the young children that I work with are so much attracted to luxury, and they are so much attracted towards all the new things that are coming around us, that they are themselves taking their children away from the nature, the conservation that we are talking about. How do you think that can be tackled?
I have to mention a disclaimer here. Other than the flight I took to be in Jaipur and I'm staying at ITC, my living is very minimal, so I may be able to answer this question.
It's as simple as having air conditioners in schools now,
Right.
in classrooms.
Right.
There are playgrounds which are indoors. There are no playgrounds. There are indoor rooms where the children are playing. So where is conservation? Where is nature that we are talking about when it comes to schools?
The good news is that there are forest schools, and for that concept is coming
But
up.
there are very few.
There are very few, yes, but it has begun. In fact, I made friends with a forest school teacher from Singapore recently at a conference in Denmark, and he was sharing how much it has impacted the lives of not just kids from usual affluent backgrounds, but even kids with handicaps. That that is a model of education that is a lot more inclusive, that is a lot more forward in the way it is developed and thought of. And I think the more it catches on, the better it is for this country to go forward. I know a lot of environmental educators who engage with uh, conventional curriculum to bring in an aspect of environmental awareness, nature awareness, and conservation in the midst of what a normal educational module would be like. And I think that that's really important because it also gives students a socio-political sense of environmental awareness from very early on, and hopefully will make them greener and more conscious voters. And that's the change that can bring about is much more than what we have discussed in the last 1 hour.
I hope sir could do something in Rajasthan when it comes to schools and environment getting together.
Well, what I tell young parents when I meet them, that don't give the kids the cell phone or the tablet. Ask them to run around, get bruised, get some cuts, play in the mud, come back dirty. I mean, that's going to give them better immunity, better health, and certainly a better brain. More the blood circulation, better the child is. That's it.
They don't listen.
Do we have time for
Some do, some don't. But yeah.
They don't listen
Yeah.
to mothers also.
Forward. I don't want her to land up in a place where she's struggling with every aspect of her life because we killed everything for them. So if I were to educate her today, because the first thing that she's ever been fascinated with is animals. She knows all animals and she knows all those figurines. So you show her a picture, she would know what it is. And she's just 1.5 years old. So I know that even I as a child must have been fascinated, but somehow my parents couldn't keep that, parent society, school couldn't keep that sort of flame in me to love nature and appreciate it. So what I would say, what are the 3 things that I should do as a parent, or what as young parents, what that would drive our kids to not be where we are today?
I'm not a parent, so I don't know if I teach kids at workshops, and I think I'm not sure about 3 things, but one thing you can do is maybe reduce access to digital means of consuming information in the years to come. I presume your child is very young, but having a parent like you is a great start for this child because you are here today and you feel for these things. The good news is that a lot of excellent literature on wildlife, on climate change, on a lot of complex issues have been coming out in India a lot more in comparison to the West. What happens in the West, especially when it comes to educating kids about these matters, is that a lot of the complexities in these issues are distilled to very simplistic narratives. And that is changing in India big time because I have friends who are doing excellent kids literature to introduce kids to very complex concepts around climate change at a very early age. So not all hope is lost, and I think I think it will be interesting, tricky, but at the same time optimistic scenarios as well for your child growing up in the years to come.
Thank you so much, Rohan and Arijit. Amazing, very, very sparkling session. Lots to think about. And I'm sorry I had to cut the questions short, but there's always good things, always last for a little time. I'm going to call Mr. Bhupendra Nana from ITC Rajputana, our general manager here, to please come up and give the mementos to Rohan and Arijit. But guys,
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes, read.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And if I can just,
Yes,
I just want to add to the topic that ITC Rajputana, even though it's about 32 now, 32 years old, we are the only lead certified zero carbon hotel.
Fantastic.
So the building we are in is a green building. And like you very rightly said, it is the intent which is important. Like, no other hotel in the state of Rajasthan is as sustainable as we are. So it's all about a responsible luxury. Having said that, I thank you again for being here. I thank you, Ms. Kapoor, for bringing this forum to us, and I thank you, gentlemen, for a lovely evening. So enlightening. I had excused myself from speaking on the stage because of obvious reasons, but I love speaking and I was inspired to speak here. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for doing this for the environment. And it's my company's ethos which makes me stand here and speak, and so nice to be associated with. Thank you. Thank you, please.
Thank you. Thank you.
For all of you, yeah, you can pick up a copy of a book each and get it signed by Rohan. Rohan, you can stop feeling guilty about staying in it.
Yes, absolutely.
Now
Now that I
one
know
thing I
it's a
really
sustainable.
admire is you're very sensible not having kids.
Oh my
Full
I'm not sure how
respect.
many of you people will agree.
Full respect.
This love is our divine right, and nothing can take it away. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. When will we ever see that we must only be to feel the freedom of our humanity? For in this great land we share a home, and in this great love a family. For in this great land we share